Hey everybody, so today I am bringing you my item and enemy farm guide. This is not a guide to a specific farming setup, but I'm going to talk about the principles of farming enemies for items because there are many ways to do it, and it really depends on what you're trying to farm and how far you want to go with it, depending on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. I want you to be a little creative with it, but I will show you a few basic ideas. So I'm going to talk about the basic information like spawn rates. I'll talk about the physical setup of your farm or your arena sort of thing, and the AFK and semi-AFK approaches, and also how to create artificial biomes. So first of all, spawn rates. If you are trying to farm for something, first things you're probably going to want are water candles and battle potions, because those will increase both the spawn rates and the spawn cap. There's a cap on how many enemies or critters or findable NPCs will spawn. So this also applies actually if you're looking for critters, sometimes for bait, particularly when it's raining, and also for some of the NPCs that are found like bound underground and so on. It will actually apply to them as well. You can increase their spawn rates the same way by using water candles and battle potions. Conversely, sunflowers, peace candles, and calming potions will have the opposite effect. So those will actually reduce spawn rates and reduce the spawn cap, which is one of the reasons that you probably don't want to do this around your NPC village, also because you don't want your NPCs to die. But in normal mode, when you have enough NPCs, enemies will not spawn in your village anyway. So you probably want to do this a little ways away at least, and not get your NPCs hurt. So there's also worth noting that different biomes have different spawn rates and different spawn caps. And this is a good point to mention that I will be including some wiki links in the description of this video, including a table with all that information. And the blood moon actually roughly doubles the spawn cap, the number of enemies that will spawn at the surface only. It does not affect underground. And many invasion events, not all, but many invasion events will ignore these modifiers like the battle potions and water candles and stuff, as well as ignoring the normal rates and cap of the biome that you're fighting the invasion in. They often have their own spawn rates and spawn caps. So when you're looking for rarer items and enemies, a life form analyzer is going to come in handy. You can see mine says no rare creatures nearby. Certain things that you're looking for, like mimics, will show up on the life form analyzer. So that's worth noting as well. So let's get into your farm setup, your arena setup. There's a few ways to go about this, and it really depends what you're trying to do and how rare the thing that you're trying to get is. So it's worth noting first of all that enemies will generally spawn off screen. They will not spawn like right in front of you. Obviously the game doesn't want to like just have enemies appear out of thin air, so they spawn just off screen. And so you can get away with something like a simple open area like this. This is not a good farm, but this is actually what I used when I was trying to farm the hallowed mimic to get the Daedalus Stormbow. I just created this open area with some platforms. They do need, especially ground-based enemies will need a little bit of ground to spawn on, but you don't want them spawning in some little cave that they're going to be stuck in and can't get out of. You want them spawning in an area where they can get to you, because you want the enemies to be able to get to you, because you want to kill them and get the things you want. The ideal setup would be more than this, to set it up with like platforms and things to funnel the enemies towards you. You can do corridors, you can do pathways, you can do either a big open area or a very closed area that's all filled in with solid blocks, and only allow them to spawn in certain passages towards you. So you can play that either way actually. Either a closed-in area with passages that lead them all towards you, or an open area with like maybe something like platforms that lead them towards you. You can play that either way. And yeah, there's a few variations, and well, there's infinite variations really on how you can set that up. I also showed something ultimately similar in my Duke Fishron guide to get truffle worms. Another approach is just to have a big long passage and to basically run back and forth and just look at your, in this case, if it's something that's going to show up on your life form analyzer, you can run back and forth until it shows up. And for truffle worms, that will totally work. So in this case, I just built a big long corridor. I improved it slightly from that video. And basically I can just run back and forth through this biome. The whole thing is this biome, and eventually one will appear because I'm despawning enemies that are off the edge of the screen, and I'm spawning new enemies as I move into a new area of the biome again. Basically, you know, the far side has disappeared now. Well, the enemies always are in the range of your screen space. They can be a little bit off the edge, but they'll generally be close by. So if you move far enough away, you'll actually despawn those enemies and give it a chance to spawn some new ones. So those are some approaches for more basic stuff. And there you go. Actually, there's a truffle worm somewhere nearby now. It's on the lifeform analyzer. I don't know. Yep, there it is. There's a truffle worm. So it's a good example of how you can farm for things like mimics and truffle worms without going to a lot of trouble. That's a very basic. Obviously, you can go to a lot more trouble, especially if you want to get a lot of them. You can get more involved and do something more interesting or more specialized, but you don't actually have to. So you can start with something as easily as that. And speaking of starting, something that's going to be very useful, particularly in pre-hard mode, is a simple lava trap. You can just dig a pit and dump some lava in it. This is a slightly more advanced version called a pyramid or a volcano trap. And this is going to be mostly useful in pre-hard mode because most of the enemies in pre-hard mode are ground-based. They're going to wander along, they're going to wander up the side and fall in. You've got a little overhang so they can't jump out. And I've, you know, beveled the sides with a hammer to make it nice and smooth to encourage them to walk up there. But basically the enemies will generally follow you, and they will fall in the hole, and they will die by lava. Obviously flying enemies not quite so much. But this will also work probably better if I dig down a little further so that they try a little harder to pursue me downwards. And you don't even need to do it this way. You can just dig a hole in the ground and dump some lava in it, and dig a tunnel underneath it to collect the items, because you do want to be able to collect the items from the creatures that die in your trap. And that's why I have this little gap underneath, as well as being a way to attract the enemies to me. But hey, actually this might be a good opportunity to use the battle potion and the water candle just to see if we can get those effects. I think I might need to put this on a surface, right? If I recall correctly. So let's put down a workbench. There we go. And yeah, that will increase the spawn rates and the spawn caps, and I'll get more enemies, and hopefully at some point we'll get some guys that I want in here instead of just pixies. But also I can always kill them, clear them out, and allow new enemies to spawn in their place. And speaking of lava, an important thing to know about lava is that the depth of the lava matters to the effectiveness of your trap, depending on what it is that you're trying to get. Because if the lava is deep enough to more than halfway cover the item that you're trying to get, and the item is a white or gray rarity, the item will be destroyed. If the lava more than halfway covers the lowest rarity items, it will destroy those items. Higher rarity items will not be destroyed by the lava. But depending what it is you're going after, you may want to destroy those low rarity items, or you may not. It actually depends, because there is also a limit to how many items can be quote-unquote loose in the world, laying around on the ground and so on. So with a lot of your traps, you'll need to collect the items occasionally if you're going for like an AFK approach. But if you're not going for, you know, cheap stuff like copper coins, you can actually just make your lava a little bit deeper, and it'll destroy that junk and leave you only the rarer items. On the other hand, if you want, you know, every copper coin you can get, then you want to keep it low. So basically how that works is one bucket in a 6 to 8 block wide area like this, one bucket of lava. Of course, you're going to need to make your way to the underworld to get lava, and you will need a bucket to collect it. But one bucket full in a 6 to 8 block wide area like this will destroy copper coins because they're smaller, will not destroy bigger coins, so you can still get those. and it will leave a lot less to collect because copper coins are, of course, very, very abundant. Whereas if you don't want to destroy anything, you can put one bucket of lava in something like a 40 block wide trench or moat or whatever you want to call it, and it will not destroy items at all, but it will still damage your enemies, which is what I did in my invasion event arena. And of course, if you don't care about those low rarity items at all and you don't care about any of the money, then you can just make it deeper, and it will destroy all of the junk and leave you only the rare items. Oh, are they going to chase my angler right in there? See, and that's how it works against ground-based enemies. And that's the idea. So farming for certain things, like there we go, I got a light shard that way. That's a nice simple approach. So let's get into some of the more advanced stuff though. So if you're going for like an AFK or semi-AFK trap farm or arena or whatever enemy farm, then you're going to need to go to something a little more advanced. There's two basic approaches. You can either use minions, i.e. Summoner stuff, or you can use traps. And the funny thing is that I mentioned my invasion event arena. Well, it turns out it's actually pretty close to what's needed for an AFK farm as well. It's actually very similar, and there are some basic modifications. Regardless of which of those approaches, you're probably going to want a campfire, a heart lantern, and some honey to increase your regeneration, and therefore the likelihood that you will survive when you're not actually sitting at the keyboard. And you'll also want that stuff to be a little ways up off the ground, because as I mentioned, the enemies will mostly spawn just off screen. So if you're a little ways off the ground, they'll actually spawn more often, and they'll still be killed as long as you're close enough by your traps and lava and so on. And so that will actually help you in what you're trying to do. And you can see I have some lava, as I mentioned, down here, and that's already working. If you're on one of the updated platforms, you can also put conveyor belts in to bring the items towards the sides. They will not move enemies, but they will move items. So there we go. And I've set these up on actuators as well so that I can cover and uncover them. And all of this I actually did for invasion events, but it works for this as well. And with those slight modifications, it works for both actually. So if you're using traps, obviously it's an arena style farm. It doesn't have to be obviously exactly like this either, but if you're relying on the traps, it's going to be kind of similar to an invasion arena. And differences are, if you're relying entirely on traps, you're actually going to want to probably enclose yourself in a solid box. There are some enemies that can attack through that or pass through that, but that will protect you from a lot of the enemies. And if you have this stuff to help your regeneration and you have something to take out enemies that pass through, you can basically get away with that. Now, you can also use turtle armor, so if the enemies attack you, they will have that damage all reflected back to them, and that can help you as well, because that will actually kill them without you doing anything. Yeah, early in the game, obviously, the lava and regular dart traps are mostly what you're going to have access to. Also on PC, they've added geysers now, but I believe that's only on PC for the time being. You will need to get into the jungle temple to get the more advanced traps, like the super dart traps and the spiky balls and the spear traps and the flame traps and so on. So it is possible to glitch your way into the jungle temple earlier in the game. Normally you would have to defeat Plantera before you can get that stuff. It is possible to get in there and collect that stuff. So that's one reason why a lot of people always want to do that, of course. And yeah, it's actually about that simple, really. But again, you want to funnel the enemies towards your traps or towards your minions. And I did make some small changes. I actually tested this against a what's it called? A solar eclipse. And I had to make a couple little changes because they were getting stuck over here. I had an extra block so I could hang an extra banner. And so they were getting stuck there, so I just took the extra block out and beveled it off so that flying enemies will move over. And similarly, they were getting stuck against the edge of these traps, and so I put a beveled block there to smooth that over. And obviously this is not like the exact way to do it, but this is how I just modified an arena I already had to accomplish the same goal. And actually I'd taken a few traps away here and they were getting stuck there for that reason too. You basically want smooth surface so that they're funneled towards the traps and they're funneled towards you if you want to fight them or your minions, so that ultimately all the stuff gets done for you. And so again, using minions, you're going to want summoner gear. You can still use turtle armor even with minions, of course. You'll want some accessories to increase your number of minions and their effectiveness and so on. So things like pygmy necklace and necromantic scroll, and I've got a bewitching table up here. All that stuff's going to help so you can have extra minions, and that's basically the general idea. So at this point, I'm going to fast forward a little. I am going to talk about how to set up artificial biomes, because another thing to be aware of is that obviously you don't want to go to this kind of trouble over and over and over again. You can build a big farm setup like this in a particular biome to farm stuff from that biome to get specific things, but it's probably going to be easier to bring the biome to you, so to speak. So what you can do is create artificial biomes around your arena to bring the enemies you want to your farm, instead of building a whole new farm in a different biome. So I'm going to talk about what's required to make a biome, but first let's actually summon a solar eclipse so you can see this in action while I talk about that. 1 second. Okay, and of course it's decided to rain on my parade, but one thing I almost forgot to talk about is statues and mechanisms. So there are statues that will spawn enemies, of course, but enemies spawned from statues will not drop coins. They will never drop coins. They're no good for getting money. Some enemies spawned from statues will never drop items. Some will not drop items if they're killed by a trap, but will drop items if killed by lava or by you or your minions. So you'll basically have to look up the type of enemy and whether you can farm it for that item if you're looking for a particular item from an enemy that's spawned by a statue. You'll basically have to look that up. Now, that being said, there are, of course, timers, and beyond timers, for both your traps and your statues, you can use timers to activate them. It's going to be a lot faster than pushing a button all the time. But if you want them to activate more often than a timer can do, you can also use engines. And that's why people talk about bird engines and crab engines, because basically what those are for is activating your statue or mechanism more often than a timer can do. So I'm not going to get into how to make one of those, but that's what they're for. So without further ado, let's talk about, well, let's show you what this can do with a solar eclipse while I talk about artificial biomes. So I'm going to want to turn on my traps to show you how all that works now. And there you go. The traps are effective. And the minions will take care of anything that comes close to me, so that's how I kind of just did this. I didn't put a lot of work into this, honestly. I didn't put a lot of effort into this setup because this arena was already here. I just had to modify it. But talking about artificial biomes, so basically the way biomes work is it requires a certain number of, I'm not even going to fight that because I want to show you how this will work on its own. You see, the minions will take care of it for me. And you can see my health regenerating fairly quickly because of this stuff. So the way biomes work is basically that it requires a certain number of blocks of a particular type in a certain area. Forest, or aka the purity, is the default biome if no other biomes are present. So by default, if there's nothing else going on, you're going to get the purity, the forest that you spawn in at the beginning. Desert is kind of the second lowest priority, let's say. It requires 1,000 blocks of sand to turn the biome into desert, but it will be overridden by most other biomes. So the jungle requires 80 blocks of jungle grass on mud, and this is why I've created this little thing over here. This is to show you how to maximize your grass yield. Basically, by having these gaps, using this sort of checkerboard or crosshatch pattern, it will grow grass on both sides and maximize the amount of grass that you can get, whereas if you have a big solid block, it's only going to be on the surface. So this is maximizing your surface area. You can get more in a smaller area. I'm not actually going to plant it with jungle, but that's how you can do that for that and other grass-based biomes. So also worth noting, because the jungle obviously has a surface jungle variant and an underground jungle variant, you may want 2 farms at least set up. You may want one at the surface and one underground, depending what you're farming again, because some enemies will only appear around the surface and some enemies will only appear underground. So that is one reason you may want at least 2 nonetheless. So, snow biome requires 300 or more snow or ice blocks. Snow bricks will also count. There are some enemies that will only spawn if ice blocks are present, though, so you'll probably want at least some ice. Ocean biome requires actually 1,000 tiles of water connected to one another. Basically, 1,000 blocks of continuous water on top of a layer of sand. It has to be a solid layer of sand. And it also has to be within 250 blocks of either side of the map edge for it to count as an ocean biome. Now, it doesn't actually have to be that much for coral to grow. It can actually be a very small amount for coral to grow. I think it's 7 blocks high of water. But if you want your ocean fish, you need the 1,000 blocks of water. So on sand near the edge of the map. Now, hallow, you need 100 tiles of hallowed grass and or pink ice and or pearl stone and or pearl sand. And for corruption and crimson, you need, for corruption, 200 corrupt grass and or purple ice and or ebon stone and or ebon sand. For crimson, 200 crimson grass and or red ice and or crimstone and or crimsand. Now, the interesting thing about hallow and corruption or crimson, most biomes you can actually have more than one at a time, which is why you'll see, you know, a combination of enemies in some areas. You can have, most biomes, you can put, like, say, some jungle here and some corruption here, and if you have enough blocks of both, it will count as both, and you'll get enemies from both, which is the way you can farm multiple things at once. But hallow and corruption and crimson you can have together, but hallow you can't really effectively have in the exact same place, because hallow will count against, each block of hallow will count against the count for the number of blocks for corruption or crimson, and vice versa. So every block of corruption or crimson will count against the number of blocks of hallow. So you can't have them right together, but most other ones you can, which is how you can farm multiple things at once. You can make one giant farm for all the things. But moving along, mushroom biomes require 100 tiles of mushrooms and or mushroom grass. Again, mushroom grass grows on mud, not dirt, whereas most of the other ones, it's just jungle and mushroom grass that grow on mud. The other ones all grow on dirt. You can see what I mean here, by the way, about having that little gap in the traps and they get stuck there. You don't want things like that. You want to design your farm so that the enemies keep moving in the direction of the traps, or at least keep moving around among your traps, whereas these guys are not getting killed. So that's a flaw because I took away those traps. But anyway, moving right along. A few more to talk about. Meteorite biome requires 50 meteorite ore in one area, and it actually will transform any biome into a meteorite biome except for the ocean. So if you have 50 blocks of meteorite, you're only going to get meteor heads. That's all the enemies you will get. It will be converted into entirely a meteorite biome. So that's another one that I guess can't really coexist with other things, except for apparently the ocean. But There are, last but not least, a few special biomes that have special background walls that cannot be moved. And the dungeon, of course, is one of those. You can't just dig out the dungeon background walls and move it to somewhere else. Also, the underground desert and spider nests and the lizard temple actually are all based on those background walls. So you can't move your lizard temple either. The underworld doesn't work quite the same way. It's not based on the background walls. It's just based on depth. Below a certain depth, it's underworld, and that's that, basically. And you cannot put underworld stuff somewhere else, conversely as well. So it's worth noting that there are higher spawns in the dungeon biome. So you can create other biomes within the dungeon and farm those as well with that higher spawn rate. And lizard blocks, while you cannot move the jungle temple itself, you can put lizard blocks other places and they will count as jungle biome blocks. So it's not just jungle grass, but also lizard blocks will count towards jungle biome. And the jungle likewise has increased spawn rates. So I think that's most of it now. Hopefully I didn't forget anything, but that's how you can do it. And if I have enough blocks of jungle, I can farm jungle stuff right here. If I have enough blocks of corruption, crimson, hallow, and so on, if I take away all of the things that are not purity, then I'll get that. This actually is corruption because I have corruption creeping up from under the ground, as you can see on the minimap. But obviously solar eclipse will take over from that and so on. But that's the basic idea, and if I want to increase these spawns a little further, I can use another battle potion. I can stick down a water candle. And I think that does actually affect the solar eclipse. It does not affect invasions, but the solar eclipse is not an invasion. And I think the pirate invasion is one that you can actually increase the spawns maybe as well, according to what I was reading on the wiki, but the wiki is not always right. So anyway, hope you liked the video. I hope that helps with creating your farm. Please give it a like if you liked it, and please subscribe if you haven't already. That's all for now, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.